What is up, ladies and gents? This is of course Sugi JRPG here, coming back after a bit of a hiatus. I've been busy changing apartments, doing errands, so I haven't had the chance to really play any RPG games until recently. So today we are going to be reviewing Granblue Fantasy Relink for PC. Now before we go into my review, there's two very important points we need to make that everybody should know before buying this game. So number one is that Relink is a side story in the Granblue universe, which was originally a mobile game, and then a couple of years back they also had 2 seasons of the anime. But what you kind of need to understand is that this side story starts in the middle of these bigger stories that have been told in the anime and in the original game, meaning that you don't really have any grasp or understanding of the character developments, how the characters came to be together, what were the events that conspired before the events of Relink, and etc. So there's a lot of information, world building, and all of this stuff you are not getting any access to because there's no flashbacks, there's no recaps of the events that happened prior. Yes, there are these Relink story missions, which are basically audio dialogue by some of the characters, and they will kind of tell a bit about their past to give you, so you get kind of this sort of a fragmented idea of the story, what happened prior, but it's still like, yes, it's a standalone story, but you don't get to really appreciate it if you're not very familiar with the main IP. So that's a very important thing that needs to be understood before you actually are going to be buying this game. And it's kind of sad that they missed the opportunity to basically use some clips from the original game, or perhaps like scenes from the anime, which could have fleshed out things a lot more better in my opinion. The second point is that this game is actually embarrassingly short. I mean, this game was 8 years in development, let's not forget that. So this was delayed multiple times, and the main story is roughly around 10 to 12 hours if you do not do any side missions. With side missions, it took me around like 15 to 16 hours to roughly complete the game. That's excluding like the crashes that I got and maybe when I was AFK with the game. So it's not a very long game, and they're still like asking for a AAA price for this. So that's something you have to have a bit of an expectation before going in, that it is an incredibly short game. And yes, there's an end game, and we're going to be talking about that later. But when we are usually buying RPG games, especially JRPGs, we are expecting usually at least like 30 hours of gameplay, especially from a AAA game altogether. So a lot of people are going to be a bit bamboozled by the fact that this is actually a very, very short game. So in that sense, I kind of recommend buying it on discount or on a second hand if you are buying the game on console. And the developers did talk about there might be allegedly like 100 hours of gameplay, but the fundamental fact is that the end game is quite a lot of like looping around the same 3 bosses over and over again, the same zone. So it's not really truly something new. It's just kind of rehashing the same stuff with a couple of new features on the top of it. So now that we have broken down these 2 important caveats you should know about the game, let's get into the actual other aspects of the game. So starting off with the gameplay, I really like the gameplay loop. This is actually one of the best JRPG combat systems ever done if we compare to recent games like FF16 and Tales of Arise. I feel this combat is a lot more faster. Your abilities also do actually a lot of damage. You can feel the power spikes and the damage that you do, the actual output, because in 16 it felt like all the monsters and bosses had so much health, and in Tales of Arise it felt like all the damage was actually assorted into these team member moves while you individually weren't doing that much damage. So in that sense, Granblue Fantasy has a very, very sweet spot here with the damage. And the combat system has a lot of variety, so there's a lot of different abilities you can unlock through the skill tree. There's aerial attacks and dodging, blocking, all these team-based attacks. And it's just a really, really wholesome combat system very good key buttons. It didn't feel like clunky or anything like that. You have your animation cancelings and things like that. And for the most part, it was pretty balanced game. Yes, I would say blocking was maybe too powerful. And I didn't die at single time on the normal difficulty, so it's kind of hard to lose on the game in a sense because people can revive you. So maybe there are some couple of balance issues, but I've always said this on my previous reviews that these action RPG combats are really, really hard to balance out to make them like feel really good. Earlier Tales games have maybe done the best job with that. But yes, I think that the combat is actually the highlight of this game altogether. And that's amazing. And then there's obviously over 20 different characters to choose from. Some of you are unlocked in the very beginning, and then you can gradually buy them with these tokens that you get from side missions and also completing throughout the main story. Usually each of the character has some type of a special mechanic, like some like gunner characters can like put up a FPS mode and shoot with the gun like that. And some other characters have like different forms they take, transformations I mean, and some have like different sword stances, and some have more aerial attacks, some have summons. So there's a fair amount of variety. While the characters, they don't design-wise look that different, it's kind of like cute anime girls and, you know, yaoi guys mostly. It could have needed maybe more like humanoid monster style characters, which would have like, you know, felt a bit different in terms of the personality and like overall design. But overall, like, I do like enjoy playing most of the characters. I didn't find like a one character that was lame to play or slow to play. Some characters obviously a bit faster in their attacks, some are a bit slower, so there's kind of like something for everyone, and I really like this. And the game is, however, as I said, it's kind of short, so you don't even get to even experiment all the characters before the game is already over. So you kind of have to choose very early on who are you going to be starting to max out in case you're not going to be playing any of the end-game content. So there's a lot of that goes into that. But I fundamentally like, yes, the gameplay in terms of the combat is amazing. Now, there's obviously other features in the game, not exactly like mini games. There's 2 hubs, 1 village and 1 city that you go through, and everything rest are dungeons. There's not like an open world exploration inside the game, but you're like able to find chests in the cities and certain collectibles which are for quests. And these side quests are usually find X item or kill these monsters or something like that. Pretty simple stuff for the most part. And these are just like ways to more like grind out your characters, level them up. And it's just like something I recommend doing, especially on the main story because it's so short. So you should take your time basically grinding out some of the side missions, because you also can experiment with different types of characters. Now, in terms of like other things you can do in the game, you also have you can exchange items. So you have these coins which can be basically moved into crafting items, and then you have this forge system where you can forge new weapons and you can upgrade the levels of those weapons, which will obviously increase their stats and unlock these new sigils, which are basically giving you like bonus health and things like that. Now, it kind of has a bit of a like this Diablo 4 type of a feel to it, and Stranger of Paradise, where you're getting too much upgrades and too much new items on a frequent basis, so you're changing constantly your sigils on your characters and you're maxing out the XP all the time. I don't like this type of a tempo. It's too fast, but given that there's so many characters, you kind of need to have experience coming fast if you want to level up them all to like level 100. So I kind of understand that, but I don't like it. It's kind of breaks out the meaning from any progression system if the progression is too fast, because you want to have kind of like that one build, that one weapon, and feel it out for a while before you are changing it to another one. So this is something of a mechanic I don't like in certain JRPG and RPG games. I don't think it's a good design choice to have such changes coming in rapidly, and obviously then you might be changing characters that you play when you unlock them. So there's that too. And does the game's normal, you know, the core game with those original side quests, what it is 15 hours, doesn't give you enough to basically explore these characters and everything around it. And the levels are kind of repetitive because you are going through again and again the same dungeons and same bosses. Like, they just have reskinned the boss in a different way, and maybe it has more health and level, but it's basically the same boss. So there is that repetitive nature in this game a lot in terms of the mobs and bosses. There isn't really that many unique ones. And that kind of makes me question about, once again, like, hey, you spent 8 years in this game. Are there things missing out, or did you rehash the game, or what exactly did you all spend all your time into? I felt like you didn't need to have like 20 different characters to play with. I would rather have a lot more different bosses and different zones than new characters, to be honest, because that's what I felt, that there was like really lack of different bosses and things like that missing out on the game. Then there's obviously, that needs to be mentioned, is that there are side quests in this game, and those side quests can be played online. So you can you can go into a queue and it will queue you with other players, or you can play with your friends. But there's no way to play the game, the main story, with friends. So this is only limited to side missions, which kind of sucks because I kind of was expecting this Stranger of Paradise aspect to it, that we could play the game through from start to finish with our friends, because this 12-hour thing is actually very ideal for a co-op, in my opinion. But like, this is something that I wish that they would have done. Now, going into other aspects, we have the sound. I don't think there's anything like really big to write about of the soundtrack. I think it did its job. It has good tracks. I think the ending song was very touching, and that's where I maybe had the only emotional connection with the game. I think it was way too short to me to build up anything meaningful here, or a relationship with the game. But I think the audio was, for the most part, good. There's also Japanese dub here, which I chose because, you know, with these non-Square games, they tend to have the most awful English dubs. I just can't stand them. Sometimes they do a good job with that, and sometimes they terribly hit that. And in terms of the, I mean, I kind of like the voice actors, but one of the things after you've watched 200 to 300 different anime, you are getting tired of hearing the same voice actors. And the little dragon in this one, I don't remember the character's name anymore, but it is the same voice actor as Happy in Fairy Tales and Eden Zero, so this was the most fucking annoying character in the game, and so was the voice actor, so that's the only one that I kind of hated here. And obviously the main character doesn't talk very much, because in the main original game he didn't talk. In the anime he obviously does. And oh yeah, I forgot to mention this, but you can choose actually the main character to be a boy or a girl in the beginning, but you can change the gender at any point you want. And there's a couple of also skins that you can change after you complete the game through. Now, in terms of technical things, there was a lot of reports on the PC version about crashes. There was only one cutscene that crashed to me, but that crash basically probably doesn't exist anymore after the first hotfix. So no problems in terms of any performance things on this game. It ran beautifully on 120 FPS for me. Obviously in this video you're not seeing 120 FPS, it's 60 FPS due to my OBS not being able to record 120 FPS for whatever reason. So I have to say, in terms of like the optimization and everything, the game was very, very smooth. No bugs, no glitches. It was a very like a perfect experience really, outside from that one crash that basically happened out. And I don't really have anything to complain. Obviously, I have a pretty high-end PC, so maybe some other people's or lower-end PCs will have more problems. But for me personally, the graphics, everything, it's just a very, very good-looking game. And in terms of like the designs, also the levels are really, really good, the elevations and everything. So I don't really have much else to add on the technical side. Now lastly, we have to talk about the story. Now I felt when I was watching other people's reviews is that everybody went really, really soft on the story. But as I kind of said on the beginning, it is absolutely retarded to do a game like this without having any types of recaps of what happened before. Because also, we have to understand that, like, let's say the new Avatar movie that came out last December, is that they had a bit of a recap in the second movie to kind of explain the events that happened on the first movie, because it's been over 10 years. that these movies were apart, and there's been a great gap between, I think the last season of anime came out 5 years ago, and the original game came out like 2007 or something. So it's been over a decade since this IP was last around, aside from the fighting game. So basically, most people are not familiar with this. So you have to build out this recap here to kind of bring in the new people and explain what happened. So this is absolutely amateur level storytelling. You should have known this to do these recaps and explain a bit about the world and world building all together. And so yeah, it maybe was a bit confusing for me in the beginning, but obviously with a bit of research I got a bit of the grasp about like what's going on. And for the full disclosure, I haven't watched the anime. I think I watched only like the teaser trailer of the first season, and I haven't touched upon the original game. But as I said in the beginning also, this is a short game. There's only like 2 hours of cutscenes. And when you have only 2 hours of cutscenes, you don't really have any time to do real character development. And as you might have guessed it, there is no character development in this game, outside from the villain that turns out good later, Id, which has, by the way, a horrible name. I think this ID, this is your name? Like, okay, come on guys, like even, like the localization people maybe should have done something here, but whatever. And everybody else in the story, and there's a couple of like this game exclusive characters, it being one of them, which don't appear on the anime and obviously on the original game. That these characters, like as I said, they're brought over here and they got into this airship together and they started this journey for this mission. I don't know what is the goal of that mission exactly, because the game does not do a very good job of explaining that. And basically, like, just all of these relationships that, oh, this is like the core story of the game. The group is traveling, then you have this Luria girl, which is very connected to the main protagonist because they're really linked together throughout life or something, as it is explained. And Luria gets captured by this weird cult church, which is not explained at all, like who they are, what do they believe in. They don't even have like physical churches anywhere, like none of their faith is being explored here. It's like super watered down version of any like villain antagonist organization. And basically then the group goes to rescue them. And that is the whole story on this game. And there's this couple of like things that they do in middle between, like go defeat some monsters in certain locations, and that's it. Like that's a very you know, like it may seem like in my like short version of the story, but that is almost the whole version of the story. There's a couple of twists here, but they were seen like mile away. And there's nothing really that happens in the characters that change them or have them have like fights between each other or anything fundamental about disagreements and things like that you're expected to see in many stories. You know, there is that setback part of that and all that stuff. So that's all of that is non-existent. And it is the only character that goes through this sort of a development of like, yeah, we are doing this evil stuff and now this doesn't make any more sense. I'm having doubts and now I'm changing sides and becoming one of the good guys. That's the only character development that happens. Everybody else basically stays the same. All the villains, well, technically they also kind of, a couple of them, other generals basically change sides, but like the main villain doesn't change. Any of the main roster doesn't change. And it also doesn't help that all of these recruitable characters have no play in the story. So only the core characters that are not, when they're not even in your party, you can hear the audio dialogues in the boss fights and in the actual stages that you go through. So it's kind of ridiculous in that sense how it's basically designed all together. So I was not really a big fan of it. It felt like in a lot of ways this story was written by ChatGPT. That's how bland and lame and generic it was. But we have to kind of distinguish between like what is a cringe shit show versus a generic story. So in terms of like this, the feel of the story, like how I feel about it, I don't feel very negatively about it. But from an analytical point of view, it wasn't exciting. It didn't bring a lot of emotions. It didn't have a lot of twists. It didn't have a lot of things and tempo which changed and had meaningful impacts. All of that is missing in the game. But it wasn't like this clusterfuck that we sometimes see in certain Final Fantasy games where things are not making sense at all. Like, it's not that type of a story. Or there's like some really dumb ending. You don't see that in this game. And after you completed the game, there's this sort of epilogue and hard mode. and then you get to do these quests, but these are basically like Monster Hunter, hunt these monsters, and then you get this epilogue thing. And I just don't really have that much interest of playing over and over again these same bosses in the game, because to me it's like, it's reductive. But I'm probably going to be playing it with my friend and when I'm like chilling out, but I just don't, I mean, the gameplay is good, I gotta admit to that. I don't like the upgrading systems, but the game core combat is the best part about the game, and the graphics are pretty good too. I wish this was like the more of a graphical direction of a lot of these games. So kind of my ultimate verdict here is, it's a good game in terms of combat. It's a bit repetitive. There's not really that many dungeons in the game, not really that many different mobs or bosses, and some points of the progression systems and item crafting, like, I didn't care about it. It didn't feel very impactful to me inside the game's design itself. And I wish this game would have had a longer story, and the story would have been better. Just adding like a couple of hours in the middle, do some significant things that take place there, and then we could have like gone on to something like very, very good here. This could have been not the game of the year, but it could have been a very significantly good JRPG game with a better story and a longer story and a bit of exploration. Some people talked about it would have been cool to use the airship to go explore these islands and things like that. There's really lack of sense of exploration in this game, and this has become more of a trend with a lot of recent JRPG games that I've played. I don't find that sense of exploration anymore in these games. It's not really there. But if you love the combat only kind of guy, you just love smashing buttons and, you know, good combat, this might be a great game for you. Otherwise, if you want also a great story, maybe, and also a lot of hours to grind into it, some people just don't like side content or new game plus style stuff, which this is not exactly, but kind of similar, but maybe done in a better way than new game plus, in my opinion. I mean, you have the ability to replay these missions and find the collectibles there and get a better ratings and stuff like that, so that's nice. But, you know, it depends on what type of gamer you are. If you just want to play the main game through, then I would probably wait for a discount. But that's basically my take on Relink. Stay tuned for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth review, maybe we'll review the demo and some other things. And I got some Tales games also on the line, so I'm getting back to the grind, guys. So thanks for sticking around while I was gone. But I will be seeing you guys next time on the next review. Until then, see you later.